Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Healthy Rebels, and I am so excited today. I've been waiting for this interview with Dr. Lisa Koche, who has really been a trailblazer in the field of functional medicine. And most importantly, what I would love to say about her is really having hope for people who want to get to the root causes of their disease. And to me, that is more important than anything. But I want to begin by Dr. Koche explaining her history, because it is quite dramatic, her incredible healing journey, but in what inspired her to start her place called Spectra Wellness.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here with you today. So I was lucky enough, this is how I describe it, to be a patient before I became a doctor. So you don't hear that story very much. Most functional medicine practitioners, sought out additional therapies once they were already out in the workplace and they were doing traditional medicine and they got frustrated or burned out, or their family member did. For me, the universe kind of led me there without a choice. So I was diagnosed at 15 with childhood leukemia. I felt totally fine, went in for a camp physical. They told me my blood count was down, and then the tests led to that diagnosis. So I went through 3 years of high school with a big round steroid face and a wig. I managed to handle the therapies really well, which was great. I was never hospitalized, but I would throw up after every therapy. I had bone marrow biopsies and spinal taps. I had chemo put in my spine. And when we thought I was all better, I was about to start my junior year in college, and I went for my first ever pap smear. They found a mass on my ovary, and it was hidden leukemic cells. I had to go back through chemo, and then I went into heart failure. So that's kind of the quick, what could be viewed as a nightmare journey I went on between age 15 and 20. I knew I wanted to find out why I got sick, because I was really in awe of the therapies and the human body. And I knew I wanted to go to medical school. But I went to medical school and chose a path of internal medicine because it seemed like the broadest way to learn about how the body worked. And I found out pretty quickly that, patients would come in with different complaints and get lots of tests and labs, and they really would be put on protocols that didn't seem to impact or give us an answer to their why they got sick either, right? So there was never an answer as to why people were coming in sick. So for me, I just kept asking everybody I could find, okay, but why? Drove them crazy. And the answer was typically, this is just how we do it. So I went into my residency and basically forged my own path from that point forward. I studied obesity. I knew I wanted to prevent disease and understand why people got sick. So I studied obesity because that was a glaring issue very early on. I worked with a gastric bypass surgeon that pushed me into nutrition and psychology. And then I eventually got exposed to functional medicine and went through training and fellowship there. And what I found was that it was the closest I could get to finding the why. And the patients would come in and we would try new modalities. It was really a classroom. My practice became a classroom. It was my own body was a classroom, was teaching me so many things, because after that many years of chemo, things do pop up, especially with regards to pregnancies that I had. And so to this day, I would always be about 10 years ahead of the curve because I was seeking instead of waiting for the information to come to me. So that's kind of a quick summary of the journey.
Wow, that is incredible. I just think what a difficult time in someone's life, 15 years old, to have to go through all this. So were you able to get some answers for your why about why this might have happened?
I love that question. Not that many people ask me that. The truth is, I can look back and think about some answers. I really have gotten the answers on my own journey, but it was things like leaky gut, probably some early childhood antibiotics. I didn't tolerate regular formula or breast milk, so I was on a soy formula, which I'm sure didn't help. Uh,
Mhm.
and and then potentially maybe just environmental toxins. Back in those days, they would spray in the house for bugs and things. And, my parents are great, incredible humans, but I think it was just the way that things were back then. So I would say it's a combination of everything from genetics to toxin exposure, to potentially what I was eating.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with a lot of these things. That is just like the perfect situation with genetics and environment. And yeah, so definitely. Well, good for you. So I'm guessing this is maybe what inspired you to open up your practice, or you want to tell me a little bit about that and
Absolutely.
what differentiates what you do now with people as
Yeah.
opposed to the traditional medical practices?
Sure. So I joined a group of cardiologists trying to prevent cardiovascular disease. That was one of my main interests because I was trying to reach as many people as I could. That kind of was my mission, has always been my mission, like to reach as many people as I can to show them that there are ways to find out why they're sick. There's ways to prevent them from getting sick. There's ways to reverse if they're having symptoms that aren't all just drug mediated. And so cardiovascular and obesity hit so many different, huge high numbers in the population, that's the path I went on first. And I started building my primary care practice in with that type of slant. So looking again at weight, looking at lipids, looking at blood sugars being some of the focus, but I refused to ever go in a big conglomerate medical group because I didn't want to be stuck prescribing drugs forever and I didn't want to be told what to do. So I had the ability and the autonomy to study different things along the way. And so when I started training in functional medicine and I would start dabbling with things like hormones and leaky gut, I was having remarkable results. And then I would get feedback from the patients. I learned from the patients. And then a big pivoting point in my career was after I had my daughter. I had built this primary care practice that was more focused on finding the cause. We were treating with nutrition and supplements and different types of interventions like that. And I was able to get pregnant. Nobody really knew if I could because they had to remove one of my ovaries back when I was 20. And I had had all that chemo. And I got pregnant first try. And I did great in my pregnancy up until the very end. My heart was cranky a little bit at the end with the fluid. But after I had my daughter, I got Hashimoto's, psoriasis, sinus problems. I had to have sinus surgery and I couldn't open my eyes. They were dry and painful. And so this is a big pivotal point in my life because I was already doing a lot of the integrative things I had learned. I was eating clean. I was taking supplements. I was, really researching, studying which vitamins were deficient, utilizing additional thyroid therapies and T3. And my labs looked really good and I felt awful. So I went to traditional people because I had no choice. I went to, an ENT, an endocrinologist, an eye specialist because I was told I had thyroid eye and I needed surgery on my eyes. And the journey there was really disappointing. I got no answers. And the eye surgeon told me he didn't want to listen to any of my questions. And when I refused to schedule his surgery, I got a letter firing me from his practice for non-compliance.
Yeah,
You can't make
thank
this
God.
up. Yeah, exactly. High five. You can't make this stuff up. So, and you can see my eyes are totally fine, and I never had surgery. So at that point, what was somewhat pivotal was a good friend of mine was exhausted. She was going to close her practice. She was an eye doctor. She went to Arizona and they told her about a guru, a clinician near us in Clearwater that she could see and follow up. And this man is a naturopath who has practiced kinesiology or muscle testing at the time for 25, 30 years. Now it's been over 40. And I just said, you know what? I'm open to anything. So I went to see him. He did this full evaluation with muscle testing, sat me across the table from him when we were done and looked at me and just said, how are you functioning? And when he said that, I just started crying because I was so
Yeah.
thankful. Yeah, I was just so thankful that someone could see what I was feeling in my body. And everybody else had said, your labs are fine. I didn't get the classic, you're depressed because they knew I was a doctor, but it was a lot of, well, let's try this, let's try that. And this was the first time he could say, you have 3 chronic fatigue viruses, you have leaky gut, your thyroid's not getting intracellularly, your hormones are out of balance. Like, we have some work to do. And after going on the multitude of supplements and seeing him for a bit, I started feeling dramatically better. And I started sending some of my more open patients that maybe I was a little stuck with to see him, and they got better too. And so fast forward today, this man who has now practiced muscle testing and has been a naturopath for over 40 years practices in my clinic with me next door, in the same clinic space.
Wow, that is an amazing story, because that's what they hear all the time, is like that they want to make patients think that it's just in their head, some of these symptoms.
Correct.
And so you have such a unique perspective as a doctor. So what I would love to hear is, I am sure you have the opportunity to have these amazing results as well. Do you have any favorite stories that maybe you could share of just some client or that has
Oh,
come?
yeah. I mean, we have had patients come in that were diagnosed with schizophrenia that we completely turned around, who have no evidence of any mental health disorder, off all drugs. I had a patient recently go into acute thyroiditis, which was almost like a Graves,
Yeah.
and he was having very rapid heart rate to the point that any other doctor would have sent him to the ER. A lot of symptoms of hyperthyroid, including a goiter in his neck, and his levels were sky high. And he really wanted me to work with him, and we got him controlled with a beta blocker to slow his heart rate down. But by working on leaky gut and chronic viruses and some treatment for parasites, I was able to reverse his thyroiditis. His labs are normal, and he never had to go to get toxic radioactive iodine. He didn't have to go to the hospital. So there's so many things that we can do, so many different disease states. That's just, obviously stating a couple. We've had kids who were struggling in school go from like D students to A's, as my naturopath worked on their leaky gut. Too many stories even to count, but that's an example of a couple of them.
Yes, well, you touch on something that, mental health, I believe, is a crisis now. And I don't think anything has brought this out, probably bigger that, and how, of course, our country has a lot of metabolic dysfunction, other than the recent, COVID. Uh,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
what's your opinion on how this has impacted the world at large, and how we're looking at, I would say, the chronic diseases versus acute, right?
Well, and COVID really, for me personally, and my message was a bit of a gift. I think for many people on the planet, it's been a gift because it's woken us up from a slumber. When the pandemic started, I was standing in my kitchen, and I remember watching the TV and getting scared like everybody else. But I felt like the person that was speaking was just saying, okay, well, if you have to go to the hospital, you're going to die. We don't have enough, ventilators. And if you're home and you breathe on your grandmother, she's going to die. And it was all this fear mongering. And there was no practicality. There were no recommendations other than cleaning your doorknobs, right? So I sat there and I said, okay, this makes no clinical sense to me. There are things we can do. We can rally our immune systems. And I personally know that fear suppresses immunity. So I was kind of doing this mental checkbox in my head of like, who needs to take control and speak about this? And I was like, it needs to be somebody who's like an internal medicine person who's seeing patients, because otherwise these people talking on TV, they don't understand all the calls we're getting from patients that are either sick from an unknown virus or just scared. And then I'm like, it needs to be somebody who can use a critical brain and like think about things we can do today. And it needs to be somebody who can calm people down. And I just was like, oh my God, that's me. So I literally put my phone up at my desk and started going on Facebook Lives. I had a few hundred people, mostly my patients, that were watching, and I just was scouring the data, and I would research what I felt was pretty interesting information. Then I'd present it, and then I would bring an actionable step, like, something to do vitamin wise or something else to do for your immune system. And then I would bring a calming affirmation. And I did that literally every single day from March until June. And then I went to a couple times a week. And what happened that was really interesting is more and more people started watching. They were getting some relief from a calm, critical brain. And I had that calm, critical brain because I, again, was gifted with being ill at 15. So like, nobody could take that from me. I've not been programmed. And
Right.
when I heard about hydroxychloroquine as a possible therapy, I got really excited because I prescribed it for lupus before. And so I tried to prescribe it for one of my very sick patients. And my staff got a call back from the pharmacy saying, what is she using this for? And when they answered COVID, they blocked the prescription. So I started crying because I was like, who is doing this? I really was, that's when I got freaked out. I didn't get freaked out from the virus. I got freaked out that they were controlling what doctors could do. And this was early on. So that video went viral. It ended up going to over 2 million people. I ended up with some national press. People were calling the practice, desperately asking for hydroxychloroquine. They all also
Yeah,
assumed,
that's crazy.
no, it was crazy because they assumed I was political. So they were trying to put me into a
Oh my
political
God.
bracket. Yeah. And I was just like, I think our political system is completely messed up. I think it is a bunch of talking heads being controlled by a global agenda. So I do not want to hear about your political needs
Did
and
your
wants.
patient ever get it?
No, not that time. Now, what happened that was beautiful is one of my good friends who I had worked with for a long time as a compounding pharmacist in town. He saw the video and he and I were always in contact anyway. And he called me and said, you know what, Lisa, I'm going to retire soon. Screw it. I'm going to get this for you.
Oh my God.
So he went and sourced the compound of hydroxy and then ivermectin. He paired it with some minerals, and then we called it just a compound. And that way I was prescribing a compound for my patients that needed it for illness. And
And how did it go?
patients got better within 24 to 48 hours.
Oh my God, that is amazing, and what a crazy time in our lives. I mean, they closed down the gyms and they left open McDonald's and liquor stores. I mean,
They
I'm just
closed down, and not even the gyms, they closed down parks.
no, that is just outside. I saw so many crazy things. So I'm going to transition to something more uplifting.
Yeah.
And that is, the field of people who are already healthy, who just want to get better, such as in the field of, it's called biohacking, which I'd like you to explain the term for those people who may not be familiar with it, and just optimizing performance, which of course, I know you can appreciate when you're working with a lot of people who are sick, working with people who are feeling good right now, who just want to stay that way. It's kind of awesome.
It is awesome, but I like to reframe it a little bit, which is so biohacking kind of got its term through a couple of influencers that were really working on their own body and trying ways to push the limits. And what I like to do is look at it broader, where it's wherever you are today. So even if you're not totally healthy, wherever you are today, biohacking or investigating your own biology can help us get you to the next level up. So yes, if you feel pretty good, can you feel even better? Or can we maintain that? Can we start looking at things like how rapidly you're aging and slow that down? So there's very exciting things on the edge of people that are already what we call healthy. But a lot of people who think they're healthy, actually, when we dig deeper, may not be, which is kind of interesting.
Well, and look at yourself, because you lived this yourself, where you had no idea of all these things that were going on in your body. So, I mean, because you don't just obviously get cancer, heart disease, or any of these things.
Right. Right. So I think it's what I would describe it as now. It's sort of any kind of knowledge we can get. So whether that's from new kinds of testing to look for things like tumor markers or genetics, all the way to interventions that lead to what we call hormesis. So hormesis means small stressors that will trigger production of new mitochondria. So that's getting a little bit more deep, but essentially the better performance and the better healing relies on more and healthier mitochondria. So those are the engines inside all of our cells that produce energy. So we want as many of them, and we want them working as well as possible to be our healthiest. So what happens with biohacking is a lot of the treatments involve doing things, little stressors that will help you make more of these awesome energy producing molecules. And the biggest example I have that's easy for people to understand is if you look at olive oil and you look at wine, the highest level and most coveted of those two comes from the crops that have actually had the most stress. So for example, if an olive crop, if they hit a drought or it rains too much, the olive crop, the plant has to make more antioxidants to survive, and that becomes more tasty and more expensive. Same thing goes for the grape crop. So the part that's really interesting is that plants have this capacity, but so do humans. So we've gotten lazy. When it's cold, we put on a coat or we go inside. When we're hungry, we eat. We don't get exposed to lots of light and different things. So when we do cold therapy or light therapy or fasting, those are stressors on the outside. But as long as they're not too severe, they have a positive impact where they kill off the bad cells and they trigger the production of new.
That is excellent. And just something we had touched upon before we started recording was this idea that we know fasting is really hot right now. And part of it is because of the hermetic stress. But some of the, or eating certain foods people might think are good, but the idea of moderation, and hormosis is really a small amount.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Exactly. So what I think that's true. You can overdo just about anything. Many people are just fasting without understanding the impact it's having on their biology. And for example, premenopausal women, they really need to pay attention to their cycle with regards to fasting, and different parts of the cycle are going to respond better. People that are overly stressed all the time, fasting's probably not a great idea. So knowing what's going on with your individuality and how your body's responding to a different therapy is super, super important.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's exciting. So what is something you're really excited about that is coming down in the future? You think that's going to be available in the next, 5, 10 years? I mean, I know already there's a bunch of these called clocks out there. So we can actually measure like all the interventions that you are doing, with your patients, that we can measure that they are actually making a difference. And this idea of biological age versus chronological age. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I do really enjoy the research on methylation clocks. So what they do is they look at the DNA and they look for different SNPs or damage at different locations, and then they can estimate out where you may be sitting here today and be 40, that your biological age is 45, or it could be 30. So obviously we want to reverse that clock. But what's nice with some of the newer ones is they can also show what's called the pace of aging. So it's not just an age like snapshot at this time, but it can tell you if it looks like you're aging faster than within a year, or slower. And these clocks have changed a lot in their validity. It's a rapidly moving field, so holding on to them too tightly, I don't ever think is a really good idea. But what's exciting is there's more and more interventions that are coming out that are seeming to slow this process, whether it's different supplements or, concepts on things that like hormesis and fasting. So paying attention to that trend, but also putting in your bioavailability or your bio individuality. So knowing genetic things that maybe make you more likely to have an issue with something versus somebody else. So that's one piece that I am excited about. Another is the field of epigenetics, which basically means you're not just your genes. So this is a very exciting, sort of area in general. We used to think if you have a genetic SNP for cancer or some other problem, it's like the march down the line, like you're just like, here we go, I'm screwed, I have this gene. And the truth is, it's really more dependent on the environment gene interaction. So what does that mean? It means I believe we don't fully even understand this yet, that almost every gene can be turned on or off in a good way. Sometimes it's good to have it off, sometimes it's good to have it on. And so holding on to what our gene report says and having that be the Bible, I think is going to be something that goes by the wayside.
Well, this is all, to me, the word that is just in my head is empowering, because I feel the way medicine has been kind of operating for the better part of the last century, for sure, is, you go there and then the doctor will give them a pill, which can be appropriate, of course, but at the same time, not giving the patient any empowerment to take over and take care of themselves. So
Right.
to me, all of this stuff is super exciting. And
Yeah, and that's been the classic old medicine, is the doctor's on the pedestal, right? And the patient's just at their mercy. And it's been sort of a dogma, and it's not really even the doctor's fault.
right.
A lot of practitioners that are not doctors very conveniently blame doctors, and it's really the system. It is a combination of, just money, control, ego, a lot of it more big pharma and insurance based. The doctors are honestly more used as pawns. So I like watching the doctors get empowered too, because most doctors and practitioners don't go to do what they're doing because they're trying to make money. They're doing it because they want to help people. And it's just,
Yeah.
they've gotten led down different paths for different agendas along the way.
And I also think there's standard of care, so they have to recommend certain protocols, such as, like, as an example, because I know you were in cardiology for a while, like statins, because I do sometimes, I mean, I get people that are really scared that they need to take this within a week or so, or something bad's gonna happen to them, like they get threatened.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of that is big pharma and their commercials. So I think that there is a place for that, just to mention drugs and vaccines and things in general. I don't necessarily think they were created with malintent or just money making, reasons. But once people see them as profitable, then it can become a real muddy issue where the science gets blurred by the ability to make cash, and that patient is not considered. And that's where the big problem comes in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they can be life-saving, but it's always a pro versus the con that has to be weighed for each individual patient. Which brings me to one of the hottest now medications that is out there that I want to talk about, and that is the trizepatide. I'm not pronouncing it maybe correctly, but
Yeah.
also all those weight loss medications, the GLP-1.
Agonist. Yeah, the agonist. So, like anything in medicine, for me, drug is not my first choice. And so I've also got a lot of experience in obesity medicine. I've worked with patients with everything from gastric bypass to, appetite suppressants to nutritional interventions, to really trying to understand how our metabolism works. And when these drugs started showing promise for weight loss, I was wary because there was a lot of negative chatter about them, but I was interested. So I prescribed them for diabetes before and had had some very good luck. And what I found was that a lot of the naysayers were people that could not prescribe. So I'm always very critical in my thinking. And if I'm hearing a lot of people, whether it's on social media or different places, saying something is bad, I want to know who they are and what their background is. And, do they have firsthand experience with it? And most of the time it was people that were doing weight loss programs that couldn't prescribe the drugs. So it's to their financial benefit to say it's bad. So I sat there and I just said, okay, I'm gonna just go about this and research it myself. And as usual, I was led by my own physical vessel. So with somewhat early menopause that happened probably because of my one ovary and all the chemo, with people who have chronic toxin exposure, which is all of us, and with pretty significant chronic stress, my blood sugar and my weight had gone up about my weight had gone up about 10 pounds. It wasn't like noticeable that, people would say anything. It wasn't something I was desperately searching for an answer. I haven't had a weight problem per se, but I noticed something was off with my body. So
Mhm.
I wore a CGM, which is one of my favorite things to do with patients, which is a continuous glucose monitor to try to see what was happening. And my blood sugar was staying over 100. It wasn't coming down. So I started researching these drugs. And essentially, with my history of cardiac, I don't put things in my body if I can avoid it. And one of the first things I found was GLP-1 agonists and their protective benefits on the heart. And so I said,
Okay.
"What?" Yeah, I literally was like, "Hold on. Hold the phone. I got to see, I got to understand this more." And further digging has led to neuroprotective, cardioprotective, DNA protective, and even anti-inflammatory benefits with these class of drugs. So long story short on that, again, I started the drug at a very low dose. So we're very meticulous with how we prescribe these in our practice, and my lipids and my blood sugar, which is not surprising because again, that's what the drug was, brought out for, but they were dramatically turned around. The 10, 12 pounds came off very quickly. I had been trying with all of my tricks for 5 years. I mean, and it was just gone. And so what I found in terms of doing this the right way, I've partnered with some of my colleagues that are nutritionists, some people that don't have a lot of body fat, who actually were one of the main knocks on these drugs is that they can waste muscle mass. And the truth is, I know, being somebody who's studied obesity, that any weight loss of a significant amount is going to lead to muscle mass if it's muscle mass loss if it's not done right.
Mhm.
So as we started tracking people, what I did was I took 30, 40 people in my practice. We were measuring with bioimpedance their muscle mass and their grip strength and really tracking carefully. I also was microdosing the drug. I prefer terzepatide, which is Monjaro. That's the newer version.
Yeah.
It's a dual agonist. It has less side effects, seems to work a little more effectively than semaglutide. And the patients were able, for the most part, if they were sticking to very high protein requirements and doing some weight training, we've been able to keep their muscle mass stable. And if they lose muscle, then we'll back off the drug and have them build the muscle back before we renew the drug.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head because, I mean, at least in my experience in my practice, that I've had some bad outcomes but it's not from the medication. It's because they have no appetite, so then they just don't eat and they haven't been counseled properly. And I had this one woman recently, she lost 20 pounds of muscle before coming to see me.
Yeah.
And it took 2 months. She finally gained back muscle and lost. I mean, I finally got her to eat enough protein. Her appetite was still diminished. So, I mean, I think that is it. And then the other thing you mentioned, which I think is really, really an important element of this, is the microdosing. Because I think that is the other area where people have had some bad outcomes is
Mhm.
by, just
Ramping
drop.
it up. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it sounds like you were doing all the right parts. So
Yeah,
that
and I think,
that's
as long
awesome.
that's been my experience. As long as we start super, super slow, most of our patients can tolerate it. We're again keeping a very close eye on their muscle mass, and we're utilizing other muscle building supplements too, whether it's aminos or obviously higher protein requirements and things like creatine and even urolithin A, which is a newer product that seems to help with muscle.
Yeah, no, the aminos, that's something I've been into for a while because it is hard, especially as people get older, I feel, getting women to eat the amount of protein that we are trying to get them to eat.
Yeah,
But again, going back to showing the numbers on the machine that yes, you gained muscle or lost fat, to me
they
that
love that. They
that
love that, right?
to me, that's it. Like what you're doing, is making a difference, and that is awesome. So I'd like to ask you some other questions about now, more about just nutrition and your hormone replacement. I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah. So with regards to
It's changed so much and
yeah,
people are so scared.
horm hormone replacement therapy is definitely a nuanced recommendation slash gift slash technique. I think many people do it varying different ways and based on how they were trained, based on the results they've gotten. We do almost everything in our practice. So I'm not a big proponent of pellets, especially at the beginning. I think that they can be life-saving, and we do offer them in our practice for patients who maybe don't absorb through the skin well enough. But I'd say my patients, about 80% I can get controlled with a transdermal cream. And that's nice because if you don't like how you're feeling, if something changes, you can just stop. And the vilification that came and the fear that came about women's hormones from back in the 90s is really being rebuked, which is good. Like they're going back and saying that study was lacking in several different areas. It was run all by men. It was the synthetic progestin that I will not prescribe for in my practice that was potentially causing the problem. So a lot of the time when I work on hormones, it's kind of trying to get the patient to understand and get over their fear of the programming that hormones are bad. So that's something that we have to educate on, the bioidentical versus synthetic hormones, keeping them balanced, which is something we can do. And then the benefits far outweigh the risk in a balanced bioidentical treated female, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think it seems to be that there is a big difference between the synthetic and the bioidentical. I mean, people prescribe birth control pills without any issues and put them on people for years. And
Exactly.
no one gets nervous about those prescriptions, but for some reason, when we're at this time of life, it becomes a fear. But yes, I think more people are becoming aware of the value of it. And so how do you see nutrition playing a part in hormone replacement, and how do you do that in your practice?
Well, I mean, anytime somebody's eating an out of balanced diet, or they're having a lot of processed food, there is very likely an inflammatory response. And then if they have also a leaky gut, that the persistent issues of eating processed food or a poor diet promotes the leaky gut. I see a lot of estrogen dominance, which is a problem where the liver is overloaded and it can't appropriately clear estrogen. So sometimes we'll have women, especially like in their 40s and early 50s, who maybe their progesterone is starting to drop, but their estrogen is sky high, and it's because of a poor nutrition and leaky gut. So really looking at cleaning up the diet in that regard, bringing down the carbohydrate content, so the more good fats and protein, I see better responses there. And then healing their leaky gut, detoxing their liver, then we have a lot better response with the hormones we're using.
And also, we can't forget, unfortunately, in our modern time, all of our exposure to all of the, xenoestrogens and toxins that, in all of not just food, water, air, skin products.
For sure.
There's a lot of places that we are getting these estrogen mimickers that can also, I would imagine, affect what you're doing on your end by giving, bioidentical, right?
Well, I think it's a really important point, because what happens is people may be looking at levels of things, but there's receptor resistance, where if you have xenoestrogens or these toxic estrogen mimickers, they can bind the receptor and activate the receptor, and then the good stuff can't get where it's trying to go. So detoxification, healing leaky gut, being aware of what you put in your environment, in your skincare, in cleaning products and that type of things is hugely important as well.
Basically, I call menopause the perfect storm. Because prior to that, the estrogen can protect, and you might have had all of the, dysbiosis, leaky gut, and things present, but you just didn't know about it.
Right.
So I think it is really, really critical to, that these things work hand in hand. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about your online presence and your practitioners training academy.
Yeah, well, that is a work in progress. So my goal is to, as I continue to systemize my method, because like just to go piggyback off of what you just said, menopause being, what did you say, a perfect storm. For a lot of my patients, it's not, to be honest. So what I've found is if I describe sort of this stool of vibrance and how your mitochondrial function, your thyroid, your adrenals, and your hormones all pull off of each other. So if any one goes under, if it's overworked, the other three have to hold the stool up and then they burn out faster. So I talk about how at menopause, it's a massive stressor that I agree with. And it relies on the adrenal gland, which none of us really have reserve enough to handle that. So when the ovaries are done and the adrenal takes over, that massive stressor can knock out two legs at a time. But if we've been paying attention the whole time, we have people on appropriate adrenal support. We know what's happening with their hormones. We have their gut healed and the liver cleared. I find most of my patients, we can get them under control and balanced really pretty easily because the menopausal shifts are starting at least 5 to 10 years prior to an absence of hormones. It's not a quick, as a general rule, it's a gradual decline. So my program that I'm working on is dialing in the steps to do that, to take back sovereignty, to take back your own ability to keep your body well, not just through healing. So healing it so that you can transition through menopause, like you said, healing it all the way into performance. So then we can get into the fun things like slowing aging and biohacking. So that's what the practitioner training I'm going to be offering, hopefully in the next year or so, to all types of different providers on the system on how to do it, the right steps to get the best results. So that I'm working on. And then I also have my second book that's in the works, and that is about how to take yourself through this journey. So constant gaslighting, medical gaslighting, getting frustrated, not getting answers, being stripped of hope, being labeled with diagnoses, and having it be many things that we actually can help and work on. So empowering people to take back that control and take themselves on a healing journey into performance. And it's got a combination of patient examples and my own journey, and allows people to take their own history and journey and kind of travel with me on this path to reclaim sort of sovereignty over their own health is what I'm calling that. So.
Well, I love it, and I look forward to getting it when it's out. And again, to me, it's putting the tools in the patient's hand to say these are the questions on how we can take care of ourselves, which I think that is such a important message, again, of hope and empowerment. Those are my two words of this talk.
Yeah.
So also, it seems to becoming much more common and understood about like the spiritual aspect and that part of healing. So I would just love you to comment on that a bit and how you see that, because I think it's been ignored for so long, but now we know that this thought, these feelings, it's chemicals, it's real, it's communicated.
And it's one of my favorite topics. So I was always open to understanding trauma and how it affects the physical vessel. But the more I've studied into what's going to be the next 10 years from now, understanding quantum, what's happening in the fascia, what's happening at the cellular level from an energetic perspective, we're starting to understand that there's electrons being passed and communication happening that we know nothing about. And that we have this physical vessel that we've all really focused on, but other cultures focus on the chi and the chakras and the energy systems that are coming out for feet out of our physical body. So understanding that is an entire new component that needs to be healed, and understand that that's where a lot of our traumas and a lot of our spiritual work is going to be helping. So our mitochondria, for example, our fascia are there's many parts of our body that respond to where our thoughts are. And you'll see almost every guru in this space eventually come to a time where they're talking about spirituality, which is kind of funny. So they think they can biohack their bodies all the way to, forevermore. And then most people will hit a ceiling, and it's because there's unprocessed emotions, there's grief, there's past life traumas potentially. There's all types of things that can be held in our energy field. And so that is something that the science, like you said, is starting to prove. Things like grounding, getting, your feet in the earth, leaning up on trees, electrons being able to pass through the fascia that way, how we respond to light. Very, very fascinating. I call all of that part of my kind of performance realm, and it's continuing to unwind. But you'll see, if you don't find a way to regulate your nervous system and become more of a more in neutrality, more of an observer instead of reactive, that's when you can start to really heal.
This is amazing. And of course, people like Bruce Lipton, who wrote the book, The Biology of Belief. For people who may not be, know about this topic, what I appreciate about his work is he actually showed the science in the petri dish. Because as much as we can talk about, of course, feeling good is going to make you perform better, I love the fact that no, we can actually prove on a cellular level that this is actually happening. And so, no, I think this is huge because, I mean, there's not a person that comes into your practice that they don't deal with whatever is stressful for them today, or like you said, historically, ancestrally, whatever it is, I mean, we know now there's study of the children that didn't go through the Holocaust survivors, and how it's impacting them. So I think this is really huge, and I am also thrilled that it is being recognized as part of your medical care. So you really do take a whole person approach
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I warn every new patient. I say, listen, we're going to talk about your traumas because they are tied to what is sitting here in front of me today. So we go from the beginning, we move forward, and I try to pick up on nuances of where they maybe became a people pleaser or, overachieving perfectionist, and like how that is impacting their health.
Yes, no, that is wonderful. So I would love to know, on the last note, what does your day in the life look like?
Okay,
Like,
I love
when it comes to
it.
how do you take care of yourself?
I do a lot of self-care. I have in my pocket at any one time, like oils that are essential oils. This is a high frequency rose oil from Costa
I
Rica.
got my oils too.
I've got stones,
Oh
crystals
my
and stuff.
God.
Yeah,
Me
there we go.
too.
Pyrite, we're matching here.
Okay.
So
The fire, very good.
I have stones everywhere. I mean, you can see a few of them behind me. So I'm very sensitive about the food I eat. I take 15 minutes in the morning, almost pretending like I'm not awake, to meditate and just journal a little bit. I try to do strength training a few times a week, and at least run with the dog. I definitely take at least 5 or 10 minutes after work too, to connect to nature, whether it's, again, bare feet in the grass or hanging out with the trees. I'm definitely deeply connected to nature and trees. And the evening, very often you'll find me in an Epsom salt bath, depending on what my day was like. But I use salt and essential oils and candles, and clean candles, and listen to
Glad you said
channeled
that.
messages. Yeah, channeled messages, meditations. So constantly trying to balance um, that focus, over giving, people pleasing part of me with some self-love. So that's been a journey I've really worked on for the past 10 years.
Yeah, well, that is so huge, especially everything you've been through, but being a medical doctor, because there is also rampant burnout. I know from doctors, and this is not taught. It's just go, 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 go. And
Right.
so bravo to you. Well, I have so enjoyed this
Yeah,
discussion, and we'll
me too.
definitely do it again. But well, thank you very much for today. I have found it really inspiring, and again, a message of hope and empowerment for people to take ownership over their own health, and not just accept that's just the way it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.